Well, we've been seeing you here in this incredible new miniseries, Breathe. How was the premise or even the opportunity presented to you?
First of all, thank you so much because um, breathe or well, keep breathing. It's one of those projects that once in a lifetime you get to audition for this. You really get a script in your hands that speaks to you in this way. I remember I was actually doing a show in Mexico at the moment, like a, a remote location that we were shooting, and my agents were like, wow, look at this. Just came in, this great script. And I was like, well, I'm actually working on this right now. I mean, like we had to quarantine at the time in Mexico for 5 days when you first got there. So I had the time, I'm reading it. And the audition scene was the monologue at the end in the sixth episode, which is, for those of you who haven't seen the show, it's a 6 page monologue. So I was like, okay, and you need this self tape by when? And they're like, tomorrow. So it's one of those things that's like, let's hope my memory, doesn't act up. And I started working with the script, and it's one of those things. Are you an actress? Oh, sorry. As actors, sometimes we resonate so well with certain material. It's so easy. It flows when you're reading it, and it makes sense, as opposed to other things like when I've tried to do medical terms or scientific terms, that takes a little bit of more work. But this one was so beautiful. It's so spiritual, and it's so grounding and romanticized version of the afterlife in a way. And um, it was beautiful. I did the self tape by myself. In this quarantine hotel room, and you just send it with like, I hope you get to the right hands. And surely enough, a week later, my agents were like, they want to do a Zoom callback with the producers and the writers. And a week later, I was literally how we are, you and I right now, in front of a computer with all these little boxes, intimidating, staring at you like, okay, do your monologue. And it was beautiful. It was one of those things where you now you can be anywhere in the world and connect. And it was one of those moments where, like, through your work, you're connecting with these people who were all over the world. And of course, you second guess yourself. We're always our worst critics. And all of a sudden, the monologue ends, and they're like, "Thank you very much," and they logged out. And I remember just sitting there, like in my living room, thinking,
What does that mean?
yes. And then I was like, did I screw up this? Oh, I should have done this. This moment I wanted to look up and I didn't look up. Oh, ugh. And I started beating myself up, and I could feel the tears coming up. I'm like, well, at least I tried it. It's a big opportunity, but. And that moment was interrupted by a phone call, and it's my agent's like, they want you. I was like, oh my God, like it's, I get goosebumps. It was really one of those moments where dreams come true.
It sounds
And
like
yes.
the stars aligned.
So that's literally how this project came to me, and how I got the wonderful opportunity to be in it.
Did they have you and Melissa Barrera or Jocelyn Picard spend much time together to try to make this bond as father and daughter?
It's so beautiful, this process too, because I feel like the pandemic changed so much of that dynamic. Before the pandemic, we would get a lot of rehearsal time face to face. Um, this project was shot in Canada, which at the moment had very strict COVID protocols. So by the time we actually got to see each other in person, it was 2 weeks of quarantining in Vancouver. So we did a lot of Zoom readings, and especially Melissa and I just clicked immediately. We have so much in common. We're both like musical theater junkies, and we're Latinos. we both come from a telenovela background, which is great. So we were both like, oh my God, and sharing all this wonderful stories. With Josie, she's a little kid, you know, so it's hard to interact via Zoom. So the first opportunity we had, we went out in Vancouver for ice cream, and then we started like slowly hanging out. And then, especially by the end of the show, 80% of my scenes were with her. So she was the best partner I could ask for. She's such a talented actress. It's funny. I always say as an adult, it's a little condescending sometimes when you walk in set and on a set and you see a child and you're like, okay, we're gonna do this and I'm gonna yell at you, but it's pretend. Don't worry. I wanted to be super careful, you know, there's a lot of really strong language. Uh, and she was so sweet. She's like, yeah, it's called acting. Basically, so yes. So she and then surely enough, our first scene that was very dramatic.
Pardon me,
It's,
professional
it's,
actress.
it's like checked me immediately. Um, she we went to shoot the first take, and I remember being like, okay, and then I'm gonna be a little, I'm gonna raise my voice here, and don't worry, you know, we're just acting. And we did the first take, and immediately after, you know, action, she looks at me with those eyes, you know, and she was giving me everything I needed as an actor that you would find in your partner. And she's giving me the feeling of the moment, and then I'm feeding off of her energy and her presence, and then all of a sudden I'm like, oh my God, I have a great actress in front of me. She's making my work really come to life, because a lot of times you're more worried about, you know, taking care of your partner, taking care of the kid, or when you're working with somebody who's not used to being on set. But she was just as professional as they come, and that shows so much on screen.
There's just such a beautiful nuance to every person's role in this series. I think it's super interesting and super intriguing and also edge of your seat. And there's a little bit of everything in this show for everyone. What kind of fan response, since you are a part of social media, have you been receiving to Keep Breathing?
It's one of the most beautiful, overwhelming response I've ever had in my life with a project. I also think that a platform like Netflix that reaches globally, all of a sudden you realize, oh, I'm being watched all over the globe. And one of the most beautiful things about this story is that it's universal. We all have a father, we all have a mother. Um, so the pour of love and emotionality from the audience, that's so beautiful and so raw. A lot of messages are really personal, and they're like, the scene reminded me of my father in this way, and this scene reminded me of this moment with my father this way. I get teary eyed. So, because it's a lot of, I think that's what we ultimately all wish for as actors, is to connect with our audience. You know, whether it's stage, film, theater, TV, you always want to have the audience be there with you. And it's hard when they can't relate. And it's hard when they find maybe your performance not believable. But when they do and they connect and they are moved, is it's the most beautiful feeling. Also, the biggest compliment that people are giving me lately is like, you made me cry, which is a weird compliment. Oh, I'm glad I made you cry.
Well, I mean, that's what the page monologue is for, right?
Thank you, right? Hey, job done.
Oh my goodness. That's obviously one of maybe many of your most memorable moments you had from working on the show. Were there moments though that challenged you the most? Obviously, that dialogue wise, what were some scenes really that challenged you as an actor, or maybe challenged you emotionally as a person to go
Yeah.
there?
I think I have two moments that come up to mind immediately. I think there's one very specific scene where Josie is shutting the door in my face constantly. Like it's a time we're trying to represent that time passes. You know, it's like all the seasons, winter, summer, fall, and she keeps running away from me as her father. And finally, I break into her room, and I remember that day. The director and the writer were like, "We really want you to be screaming at the top of your lungs, and we really want to see that frustration that he has built with his wife leaving. You know, ultimately, we talk a lot about Liv's character's mother leaving. From my perspective, she also left me, you know, like the father. So he's channeling all that frustration in the wrong place. And at that moment, he's frustrated and he's just bursting. And it's with this little girl. So that was really challenging because, again, once again, I sit down with Josie and I'm like, I'm really going to go there. Um, and to my surprise, when that was such a beautiful day because it was so challenging. And again, it's long hours. And all of a sudden, I go to do the scene and I'm built up and I'm charged. And it's this door. And then finally, boom, I break through and I start yelling at her and yelling again. And underneath all that, I just feel like, oh my God, I'm going to start crying from the anger, from realizing that that's not the person that I'm angry at, it's the mother. So it was this beautiful kind of roller coaster moment of like screaming at the top of your lungs with anger and frustration and ending up in this really vulnerable place where I'm so glad we caught it because there's a moment literally where my character's like realizing that this is not where he should be uh, sending all this frustration towards and he breaks down and then he tries to make up. He's so clumsy with emotions at that point, but that was really challenging. And then the monologue, the actual day of shooting too, it was funny because since the audition I was looking forward to the monologue, and it's my one scene that was shot outdoors, ironically, no, because Melissa spent all the time in the forest and here I am
She's
like
just completely in the wilderness, and here you are in AC and heat and
I'm
stuff the
like,
whole time.
what are these mosquitoes? Like, who works like this? And meanwhile, Melissa's like, I do. Uh, but it was really, really
She's like,
special.
you don't know working conditions, Juan Pablo. It's different.
Literally privilege. Um, but then we got to the location, and I remember reading in the script this beautiful river, and because we were in Whistler in Vancouver, like so lucky to have found this location that really is exactly what the script called for. And we get there and it's so loud because the river really like it's super loud and it's beautiful, but it's so loud. And I remember turning to Melissa and I'm like, how are we gonna listen to each other? Like this is gonna be weird, you know, because we interact and we're it's the magic of TV. It's like just do it and then we'll fix it and then we'll try to do another take somewhere where it's not as um, loud. But it was one of those really challenging things where also I've never had to do this beautiful moment from an afterlife perspective. So it's weird when you get text like that where you're like, if it's something linear where you're telling the other character how you're feeling or what should be done. But in this case, he's in the afterlife. So nothing, it's this very sweet moment where all the emotion is there, but there's nothing dramatic about it. There's nothing like it's just so calm and so serene and that was beautiful. The writer and
Brendan.
was Brandon who was always there with us. He was so loving and so supportive because I was so scared for every word to do justice. And Rebecca, our beautiful director, like literally holding my hand and being like, no,
You got
this is
this.
exactly what we need. And this is so it was one of those challenging and yet beautiful moments that comes together on the screen when I watched it. I'm like, I can't believe it all came
Came
together from the
together.
see, see, see.
Did you have to go back then and ADR any of the dialogue that you because
We
of this?
did. We did, which is hysterical too. It always happens. It's so funny. It's always news to me as an actor. I'm like, wow, I have to go back and you find yourself in the middle of Hollywood in a studio with your headphones and the microphone, and then transport yourself back to that emotional place where you were. Um, but I'm so grateful, specifically in this show, for some reason, the sound and the sound mix has really made the show shine so much. I don't know
Yeah.
about you, but when I was
Cinematography
watching,
is great
it's
too.
insane. But I remember watching the first episode too and being like, I've never experienced a show through sound like I've done with this one. Like you hear the airport and you hear the busyness and you hear the baby crying and you hear the cell phone and then she's in the airplane and as soon as she puts on those headphones, the cancellation of it all and the breathing comes in and then nature and then it's just insane what we can do telling stories and we have such a talented group of people with us. So I'm very grateful for everything, for the editing, for the sound mix and everybody who came together in this project really gave their best. And I think we were all committed from the heart, which is very rare, you know, when we're working long hours and you have so much fun at the end of the day. It's like a family.
With your intensity level so high for this one, you are constantly like at 100 because that's where your character is. How did you
Yeah.
shake off a long day of filming?
It was hard. And to be honest too, like a lot of the older scenes are the hardest for me too, because there were hours in the makeup trailer, like 4 or 5 hours daily.
Um,
And to start your day off at like 4 in the morning with these wonderful makeup artists who I owe everything to, you know, their artistry and to make it believable too, like that the attention to detail where it doesn't look cheesy or um so it's just beautiful. It's we were very lucky to get to those scenes, but at the end of the day, taking off the makeup and going back to the hotel, it's like whew, I just had a long day of emotional and also physical strain. So I'm grateful that we got to experience that, but it was time to unwind. It was time for meditation. It was time for hot showers, and I'm very grateful.
what do you think it is? And I think we touched on it a bit that has really made Keep Breathing such a fast fan favorite series.
I'm eternally grateful because, like we said, there's so much in this day and age where everything's so fast, and being in a platform where there's so much content and such beautiful things. All of a sudden, to have the show be number one and have people come in this ride with us, you know, the show is called Keep Breathing. I think we all long for that in an
Good
age of
advice for everyone
right,
watching.
just by the title. Uh, so it's really cool to get that opportunity to connect with audiences. It's fun. It's been also like a very particular way of seeing how the reactions people have. I think they speak so much about who everybody is individually. Because sometimes I'm like not sure if what they're saying comes from a point of like their frustration where they're like, I want my more gore, I wanted more adventure and this, and other people were like sobbing, like I said. So it's really beautiful how it speaks to everybody differently.
What are the other projects that you've been busy working on lately? I notice you do a lot of dramatic work these days.
Yes, it's so funny. I've been so lucky throughout my career. It's funny in Latin America. Um, I was known mostly for my comedic ability, and I had a very successful show called El Secretario,
Mm.
which was full on comedy. So people associate me with comedy, and then I'm having this very dramatic moment. So it's like, I mean, I feel very lucky to tap into both.
You did
Um,
Acapulco though, which snuck in a little bit of comedy.
yes, 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 yes. And speaking of Acapulco, that's another thing that I've been busy with. now that we can talk about it. I'm coming back for season 2.
Woohoo!
So I'm very excited to bring Rodolfo back into Las Colinas. So this is so much fun. I get to do what I love, you know, and it's such a blessing, and it's such a privilege to really wake up every day and try to be the best actor you can be and learn from each character, and along the way have fun. It's such a beautiful profession.
Well, what would you like to say then to everyone who are fans and supporters of the wonderful work that you do on our screens?
That's so sweet, Jamie. Thank you. Well, I would like to thank everybody from the bottom of my heart. Thank you for connecting with our show. Thank you for taking this ride. Thank you for all those beautiful, emotionally charged responses, messages, and comments on our social media too. We really appreciate it as a cast. We've been talking offline a lot, specifically with Melissa too. We we love, we feel very loved, and we thank you so much for that. So it's all because of you. So thank you.